Hello everybody! Welcome back to the channel. Today, Boomer and I will be narrating chapters 7 through 9 of Man in the Pond. And just like before, we're only going to do one chapter at a time. That way we're not trying to do 3 whole chapters all at once. Because that's a lot of work. Oh yeah, it is. A lot of recording for sure. And a lot of editing. We're also munching on potato chips. Just in case I get snot in my throat. Got a little table here between us. And I think I'm ready. Here is Chapter 7. The staff at the ER decided Annie would be okay and sent her home. After treating her and checking her vitals, she ended up coughing up most of the nasty water on her own. That night, while she was relaxing under the covers in her pajamas, her parents stayed up with her while Martin slept in his own room just down the hall. After tucking his daughter in, Albert dug through one of the boxes in her room for a story to read. Finding the one he was after, he yanked it out from under some other books. Aha! His wife glanced over from where she was sitting on the side of the bed. What you find? Holding it up so he could show her the front cover, with a cute family of mouse people and a small blue mud hut in the background pictured on it, he asked, "Remember this, Lisa?" His wife smiled when she recognized it. "We bought that for Martin when he was little." Annie grinned up at her father when she saw the book in his hand. "The Mouse in the Little Blue Hut! Please read it, Daddy. I love how his brothers and sisters help him in that story." Albert chuckled as he walked over and plopped down on the chair next to her bed. "You always loved this story more than your brother." Annie nodded excitedly, causing her mom to gently pat her arm, which lay on top of the blankets over top of her chest. "I love how Curly keeps little Runt calm in the thunderstorm. Curly is a lot like Martin." Albert smiled at his little girl as he opened the book to page 1. "Curly is exactly like Martin." When Albert started to read, he occasionally passed the book to his wife so she could read the character dialogue of the female characters before handing it back. After a while, Annie started to yawn as her eyelids became heavy. Just before Annie went to sleep, she heard her mother say, "We'll be here all night if you need us. We'll even keep the light on tonight." The girl smiled dreamily at her mother before her eyes closed and she finally dozed off. After sleeping soundly for a few hours, she woke up with a start. Looking around, she discovered that the lights were off in her room and her parents were gone. Sitting up in her bed, she slowly pushed the blankets off herself. "Mommy? Daddy?" There was no answer after she called out to them. Getting out of bed, she put her bare feet down on the old carpet. Her pink pajama pants rustled against each other as she approached the door and stuck her head out into the hall, which was just as dark and silent as her room was. "Mommy!" Annie cried out, starting to get scared. "Daddy!" Once again, there was no answer. Staring out into the dark, she got too scared and shut the door before reaching for the light switch on the wall. She was about to turn it on, but stopped when she heard laughter coming in through the window. Glancing back, she saw the moonlight shining in through the curtains, but the only shadow on them was of a tree branch from the oak outside. Walking over to the window, Annie slowly parted the curtains and gasped when she saw the man from the pond standing in the shadow of the tree between the massive trunk and the dirty gas pig. His stringy hair hung down to his shoulders, dripping with muddy water and algae. Grinning at her and sending a chill down her spine, he charged straight at the window and pressed his face up against the glass. Annie screamed and fell over backwards onto the floor, just as his eyes opened wide and he said, "I got you now! You're mine!" Crawling under her bed, she screamed for her parents over and over again until she woke up from the nightmare, crying and screaming. Albert and Lisa had dozed off themselves, but they woke up immediately and Annie's mother put her arms around her. "Annie!" Lisa said as she held her daughter close. "It's okay. You're safe now. You're safe now." Putting a comforting hand on Annie's shoulder, Albert asked, "What happened, honey?" Martin burst into the room seconds later. "What's going on? Is Annie okay?" "The man in the pond tried to get me," Annie screamed as she cried on her mother's shoulder. "I saw his face in the window. Why did you leave me? Why?" "We didn't go anywhere," Lisa said as she glanced at her husband with tears in her eyes. "We fell asleep, but we never left." Putting his arms around his wife and kid, Albert hugged them both, while Annie cried in her mother's arms. Then Martin put his arms around all of them, and the whole family supported one another. It was clear that whatever happened in that nasty pond had traumatized her, but eventually she started to calm down until her sobs became little more than a few sniffles. "I had a dream about the man in the pond," Annie told them once again. I thought you were gone because I woke up in the dark. Then he put his face against the window." Realizing they needed help, Martin finally butted in. "Dad, maybe you should call those paranormal investigators. I don't know their number, but maybe they can help." Glancing up at his son, Albert shook his head. "No, I will not call the people who pushed Annie into the water for help." "But they didn't," Annie insisted. "It was the man in the pond." "You know he's real, Dad," Martin argued. "You saw his picture. You saw the medallion. It's real." Albert sighed. "I don't know their number. The card got dissolved in the puddle." Martin calmed down a little when he realized his father had some sense left in him after all. "They'll be back, I'm sure. The next time we see them, I think you should hear them out." Getting irritated now, Lisa furrowed her eyebrows at her son. "Your sister had a nightmare, Martin. The guy who used to live here isn't even alive anymore, and there's no such thing as ghosts." "But I saw him before all this started," Martin explained. "Dad looked up the picture of him, and I'm telling you, he's real." Getting up from the chair, Albert put a hand on his son's shoulder and gave a faint smile. "If they show up again, I'll ask for advice. Until then, let's try not to scare Annie anymore, all right?" Martin nodded. "Okay, Dad." Hugging his son one more time, Albert sent him off to bed. But then he and Elisa spent the next hour or so helping Annie relax enough that she could go back to sleep. Once she dozed off again, she was able to get a few more hours of sleep without any more nightmares. Alright, that was the end of Chapter 7.
Wow, Al! Chapter 7 was crazy! And really scary! Especially when the man in the pond put his face up against the window! Oh no!
You're right, Boomer. That part was scary. Anyway, now that we're done recording Chapter 7, I'm going to get started on recording a separate recording for Chapter 8. So, I'm going to end this recording here, I think.
Sounds good to me, Al!
Okay, before we get started on Chapter 8 of Man in the Pond, I wanted to say that I switched Chapters 8 and 9 around in the document itself because the order that things were happening in was kind of weird, I thought. So, Chapter 9 is now Chapter 8, and Chapter 8 is now Chapter 9.
Oh no, Al! This is going to be confusing!
And we recorded the original Chapter 8 once before, but we didn't get very far with editing it because I wasn't quite happy with it. I wasn't sure what to do with it at first. I had to figure it out. But anyway, I think I'm ready to get started on Chapter 8. Have a little bit of popcorn first, just a little bit. Okay, now I'm ready. Actually, hang on. Gotta get tissue. Blow my nose. Now my foot edges. Now my leg edges.
What the hell? You're itching everywhere! You're blowing your nose! You're eating popcorn! I do!
But anyway, this is going to be a redone recording of Chapter 8, so here we go. Annie had a terrible headache and occasional bouts of nausea for most of the morning, following her nightmare about Ricky Stonehenge attacking her. Lisa gave her pain meds, but they only took the edge off, and the poor kid tried to remain positive by playing with her magical, flying school bus. But the pain pounding in her forehead was almost too much even then. Just before noon, her head started pounding like a hammer while she was running through the hallway by her room. Dropping the bus with a clatter, she put a hand on her forehead. Ow! Ow! Hearing her daughter's cries, Lisa came running into the hall from the kitchen, just in time to see Annie fall to the floor and start convulsing. Panicking as she knelt by her daughter, Lisa was afraid to even touch her until the seizure ended. "Martin, call 911! Annie's having a seizure!" Hurrying to get his mom's smartphone from the kitchen, Martin did as he was told, but then he called his father, who was at work, once the paramedics were on their way. "Lisa?" Albert asked. "Is Annie okay?" Hearing his son's voice caused Albert to panic. "Annie's having a seizure! I think she got sick from something in the pond!" "If you haven't called 911 yet, do it!" Albert told his son. "I'm on my way! I'll call your Uncle Rob when we know she's okay." After hanging up, Martin hurried back to the hallway, where he found his mother holding Annie in her arms. The poor girl's seizure had ended, but now her eyes were barely fluttering open, and she could hardly move. "Mommy," Annie groaned. Holding her daughter close, Lisa had tears streaming down her face. "It's okay, Annie. Help is coming. Just hang on." "Is she okay?" Martin asked. Glancing up at him, his mother shook her head. "I don't know. Is your father on his way?" Martin nodded, but he didn't say anything else. He just stood there in stunned silence, watching his mom hold and comfort his little sister, wishing he didn't feel so helpless. Now we got another little pause here with 4 stars. Yeah, we're getting close to the end of chapter 8 here, so we're about halfway done with it. So pause with 4 stars. Here we go. After blacking out and collapsing onto the floor, Annie sat up with a start. Just like in the nightmare, the house was dark, and she was all alone in the hallway with her toy school bus. The small chunk of metal full of plastic seats was no longer a comfort to her. "Mommy!" Annie cried. "Martin!" When she got no reply, her heart started racing. But when the man from the pond appeared in the doorway at the end of the hall, she started to hyperventilate. "Where's my mom and brother?" Grinning back at her with his rotten teeth, the man said, "You mustn't worry about your mom and your brother. You and I will take care of each other just fine." Annie turned and ran into her room, where she slammed the door shut and bolted for the closet. As soon as she pulled open the door and got inside, she hid under a pile of clothes after yanking them down off their hangers. Bursting into the room with ease, Ricky Stonehenge growled, "You've got nowhere to hide, little girl! I'm in your head!" Annie trembled under the pile of clothes, praying that the evil man outside wouldn't find her. As he slowly approached the closet door, causing the floorboards to squeak under the carpet, he chuckled. Then a hand suddenly grabbed Annie's shoulder from behind and gave it a hard tug. She was pulled back through the wall behind her, leaving the pile of clothes behind, but where she went after that was the closet of her old room at the house where her family lived before the big move. All of her stuff was still where it used to be, meaning she was in a dream once again. After getting pulled out of the closet, a woman in a long, black trench coat helped her get up off the floor and spun her around. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Annie struggled against the woman as she gripped her shoulders tightly. "You're a ghost too. Let me go." "I'll protect you if you trust me," said the woman. "But you have to trust me. If you don't, you could die." Annie froze when she heard that, and then she nodded. "Okay, I trust you." Then Ricky Stonehenge burst out of the closet, causing the woman to pull the girl away from the doorway and get between her and the man. Pulling a small revolver out of a pocket on the inside of her coat, the woman pointed it at him, stopping him in his tracks. "You!" growled the killer. Carol grinned at him. "Remember this, Ricky? It's the gun I shot you with after you killed my son." Grinning himself now, Ricky took a menacing step towards her. "And I peeled him apart like an onion. You should have seen it." Then Carol pulled the trigger, shooting him in the chest and sending the evil spirit away. This allowed Annie to wake up in the real world, where she was still being cradled in her mother's arms as her eyes fluttered open. An ambulance showed up just moments later, and when the paramedics took Annie out on the stretcher, she was scared. "Mommy!" Hurrying after her, Lisa said, "I'm right here, honey. I'll ride with you if it's okay." "Of course it's okay," said a tall paramedic with a goatee. "If my supervisor doesn't like it, she can suck it." "Martin!" Lisa cried as her son came out of the house. "Stay here and wait for your father." "Okay," Martin said. "I'll call Uncle Rob." Since Martin was old enough to stay home alone, he went back inside and called his uncle to tell him what was happening. Rob had to tie up some loose ends back home before he could make the 5-hour drive, but he planned to go see his niece as soon as possible. All right, that was the end of Chapter 8. So unless I misspoke and made some mistakes somewhere, I think we got through this pretty good. Well, it
It was mainly you, Al, but I did the voice of Ricky Stonehenge.
You did pretty good, Boomer. You sounded pretty demonic, I think. Even though you sounded a little bit more like, like a normal human serial killer than a demon at this point, but, when you did his voice under the water in the pond, you definitely sounded demonic then.
Oh yeah, I did, Al. But now that Chapter 8 is done, we can have some more popcorn and take a break.
Oh yeah, we can.
Good popcorn.
You're right, Boomer. It is good popcorn. Anyway, I'm going to end this recording, and then we can start recording Chapter 9. Okay, now that we've gotten through Chapter 8, it's time to get into Chapter 9 of the story.
Oh yeah! In Chapter 9 is kind of a fun chapter.
Yeah, there are some parts of Chapter 9 that I didn't like, where I almost cut out the chapter. I got really close to cutting out Chapter 9 here. But I decided to keep it in. And just get a little bit more descriptive about what people are actually eating in the bar versus what people might call them in character dialogue. Well, when we get into Chapter 9, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
I'm sure I will, Al. I'm gonna have a little more popcorn, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have some popcorn. Oh yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna start choking on the popcorn.
Oh no, Boomer, don't be laughing or you'll choke on it for real.
You're right. I gotta be careful. But what I was starting to say was I think I'm ready for Chapter 9 if you are.
Okay, that's good. I think I'm ready. So, here is Chapter 9. Around 1 p.m. that same day, the paranormal investigators went back to Nate's bar, never even seeing Annie's ambulance ride through town. But this time, they were going there to unwind, since they hadn't heard from Albert yet. It seemed like a good time to talk to the locals again, too, just in case Larry the biker could be of any help. Keeping their equipment in the van for emergencies, they went inside to shoot some pool and eat some junk food, and April was behind the counter this time, serving drinks to the customers. There were a few less of them than before, but 3 customers were still seated at the tables, munching on animal flesh and potato sticks. Buster was nowhere to be found, but Larry was sitting on one of the bar stools, having a chat with April. Evie waved to them as soon as she and her friends stepped through the door, causing their new friends to glance over and smile. "Hey!" Larry smiled at Keisha specifically. "Back to hunt ghosts again? I heard you had some trouble last time." Keisha shook her head, but smiled at her biker buddy. "No, we're just here to relax. What happened here yesterday shook us up. I'm not gonna lie." April finished refilling the pop in a customer's glass, who was sitting a few stools down from Larry, but then she rejoined the investigators to see if they were hungry. "What can I get you?"
"Beer and burger for me,"
Steve said.
"Evie's the designated driver today."
Evie rolled her eyes. "Seems like I always get stuck driving your drunken asses all over the place." Keisha and Tyler laughed, but then Tyler ordered next. "Same for me, minus the beer. Sprite sounds much better." April snorted as she jotted everything down on her paper notepad. Burger and fries minus the beer. Got it. Keisha winked at Larry before ordering her own meal. I'll have the same thing as Steve. Larry laughed. Yep, they're definitely here to chill today. Finally, Evie ordered something. Veggie stir-fry for me, if you got it. I prefer eating more veggies, honestly. April jotted down the last thing. These were some easy orders, but I'll see what I can do about the stir-fry. Thanks, Tyler told her on behalf of his friends. Can't wait to actually try the food here. April glanced at Tyler and laughed. Much better than hanging out with ghosts, I imagine. Everyone laughed at this, but then April had to get back to work, so Larry and Keisha ended up hanging out with Evie by the dartboards, while Steve and Tyler started a game of pool. When Keisha threw her first dart, it hit the board just to the right of the bullseye, in the slightly bigger green circle. Her second hit was a little low, and it ended up hitting under the bullseye, about 2 circles away from where the first hit. Her third dart almost got to the bullseye, but it bounced back and fell to the floor. Evie laughed. You're quite the pro, Keisha. Shut up, Keisha snapped back, but started to laugh also. When Evie went next, her shots were even further off the mark, causing Keisha to throw back, Wow, you really showed me. Evie gave her friend a dirty look, but her fake anger wasn't enough to hide the smile that was forming on her face. I'll show you how it's done, ladies, Larry said as he walked up to the board and plucked all 3 of the darts off. Taking a step back, he easily flung all 3 darts directly at the bullseye, causing Keisha to give him a whistle. Nice! Glancing back at her, the biker said, I can show you my technique if you like. Keisha seemed to like the idea, causing Evie to put a hand on her forehead and sigh, even though she was smiling because of her friend's behavior. Over at the pool table, Steve and Tyler were laughing at the girls and their new biker buddy, but then Steve said, Rack 'em up, Tyler! Putting the triangular rack on the table, Tyler started reaching into the pockets. Grabbing a ball, he slammed it down on the table, pretending it could feel pain. Urgh! The 2 of them reached into the pockets for the rest of the balls and quickly set them up in the rack, with the 8 ball in the middle. Once the game was set, Tyler removed the rack, grabbed a stick, and took his first shot. Leaning over the table and taking aim at the cue ball, Tyler said, Now I'm going to hit the balls with the cue. Urgh! The cue ball split all 15 of the balls apart, immediately knocking the number 3 ball into one of the corners. Watching with a grin, Steve made a comment. Nice shot! Looks like I'm stripes now! All 4 of the investigators had a lot of fun until the lights started to flicker, causing everyone inside the bar to glance up at the ceiling. After pocketing the number 15 ball, Steve saw the lights flickering as well as a glowing, white orb floating over by the jukebox. Dear God! Here we go again! Suddenly, the orb disappeared, but then the country music blasting out of the jukebox stopped, and it was interrupted by the voice of Carol Wright. Help! Help her! Everyone in the bar who wasn't a paranormal investigator or an employee frantically paid for their meals and left without leaving a tip. Larry was the only exception, but he stopped to say a silent prayer for protection. Then the voice came out of the jukebox again. Save Annie! Ricky Stonehenge got her! He got her! Holy crap! April cried, before disappearing back into the employees' area. Nope! Just nope! Walking over to the bar, the 4 investigators and Larry stared hard at the jukebox, but then Evie asked, Stonehenge got her? What does that even mean? An amoeba, Carol said. "The little girl has a brain-eating amoeba. The spirit is controlling it. Save her." Quickly eating what was left of their meals, the investigators all paid quickly and hurried out the door. Now the spirit in the pond meant business, and they needed to get a move on. All right, that was the end of Chapter 9.
Wow, Al. These last couple chapters sure were insane.
Yes, they were, Boomer. Yes, they were. And even though, as a vegan, I am bothered by the fact that the characters are not vegan in the story, I think I can veganize them over time as the series progresses. Because look at Evie. She ordered a veggie stir fry. Doesn't necessarily mean she's vegan, but it means she's on the right track to potentially becoming vegan in the future. So I'll have to decide which one that is.
I'm sure you'll figure it out, Al. But for now, it's time to end this video because we got through chapters 7 through 9 of Man in the Pond.
Boomer. But you're right. Let's end the recording here.